we go.
Okay.
What? Oh, wait. No,
Before you sat down,
wait.
I'm hoping that it was just your shadow behind the chair, but a weird shadow just floated behind it. I am really hoping that was your shadow.
Behind the chair?
Mm-hmm.
Great. We'll have to look at it won't be on the recording. It was right before you hit record?
Oh, no, I think you hit record. Before.
That'll be fun to look for later. That'll be great.
That's great.
Hello. We're talking about the YouTube video recording. And not everyone can see that. But, if you're bored one day and you want to check us out on YouTube, it's where we put they're basically unedited. Sometimes if we get interrupted, I'll kind of speed it up so you all don't have to sit there and watch us have a complete conversation with somebody else. Yeah. But it's unedited in terms of you get to hear how many times I say and Kara says so.
Huh? And so, and like, and
And sometimes if we just absolutely lose control laughing for too long.
Yes. It's great.
Yeah.
And we are people.
People.
And so you just accept us as we are.
Normalizing imperfection.
Yeah.
So hey, this is the Witches, Magic, Murder, and Mystery Podcast.
And I'm Kara.
I'm Megan.
Hello.
And today I'm excited about the story that I have for you.
Good. I'm excited.
We are talking about, so this story actually comes from two of my most favorite people in the world, Toni and Tom.
I was going to say, I didn't give this to you, so.
I didn't say my most favorite. I just said some of my most favorite. There's a collection.
Okay.
I've got a pretty solid group of friends.
I accept that. Yep.
So they're from the Chicago area.
Okay.
And they have told me back over the summer, Toni was like, you've got to do an episode on Resurrection Mary, who is considered Chicago's most famous ghost.
Oh.
And I figured October is a perfect time
Spooky
to tell you
season.
A really interesting ghost story.
Okay.
They were both really wanting, they were excited for me to do it. So it was fun to read.
Here we are.
All right. So do we have any items of business to talk about before we start on this story? Don't forget that there's all kinds of really great spooky merch in the podcast store. And if you are a Body of a Goddess level subscriber to the Patreon,
you have a discount code.
A discount code, right. Anything else? No? If you're interested in joining the Patreon or just looking at stuff in the podcast store, you can look in the links in our bio on Instagram or check your show notes wherever you're listening to the podcast, and they'll have the links everywhere there too. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Did we say this is a Witch's Magic Murder and Mystery?
I think we did. Let's do it again. This is the Witches, Magic, Murder, and Mystery Podcast.
And I'm Kara.
And I'm Megan. If we said it twice, this is a good example of
how incredible we are.
How great we are.
It's my stomach growling.
I can't hear.
After that medicinal cannibalism, just real hungry.
That's me glaring at you.
Mm-hmm.
Look how pleased you look with yourself.
So great.
Okay. All right. Ready?
Yep.
All right. So back in the 1930s, a group of men were driving along Archer Avenue, and they picked up a hitchhiker.
Don't do that.
My dad used to tell stories when he was in the Army about that's just how they would get to places. And I think he was stationed down in Alabama. And it was just like, that's what you do. And you would wear your uniform because that meant you were safe. And people they were more inclined to help you, But that's how you get from there to here, is hitchhiking. That was just normal and accepted and okay.
No, don't do that.
And I'm just like, I can't believe I'm so glad you're alive.
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay. This hitchhiker was a young woman in a white party dress with light blonde hair and blue eyes. As the car got close to Resurrection Cemetery, she asked to be let out. They let her out, and she disappeared into the cemetery. This is the first reported sighting of the ghost that would come to be known as Resurrection Mary, but there have been many more.
Oh.
Hang on. Trying to make sure we're recording. Hey, YouTube. Okay. I'm going to also reposition.
She's just going to switch, guys.
While we're here. Okay, my foot's stuck. Great at this. So
good at this podcast.
Okay. A guy named Richard Crow, who's a full-time ghost hunter, he says collected 36 substantiated reports of Mary.
Okay.
I don't know what substantiated, like,
hard evidence.
like how are they substantiated?
Yeah.
I don't know. This was from the Chicago Tribune, and that's all it said. But substantiated reports of Mary from that very first one in the 1930s through to the present day.
Oh.
Some of the reports say that she wears a thin shawl and dancing shoes and carried a small clutch purse, and she's also been described as very quiet. According to the legend...
That's even spookier.
Yes.
What are you thinking? Is what I would be
Yeah,
like,
why aren't you talking?
But
But they just think when they encounter her, they don't realize she's a ghost. She doesn't look ghostly. She just looks like a human.
What if someone was like, ma'am, I'm not dropping you off at the cemetery. I don't feel like this is safe. I'm taking you to this place.
Then she would disappear from the car. Look at Kara's face. I'll get to it. So,
Okay.
according to the legend, Mary and her boyfriend had spent the evening dancing at the O. Henry Ballroom.
Oh.
Fun fact, the O. Henry Ballroom would later become the Willowbrook Ballroom, and my friend Toni, she worked there as like a coat check girl.
How cute.
I know. I think that's adorable.
That's adorable.
A coat check girl?
A coat
Like, that's
check
a real
girl.
thing? Yeah.
May I take your coat?
While they were there, they had an argument, and Mary stormed out of the ballroom and started walking up Archer Avenue. That's where she was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver.
Oh, gosh.
Who left her there to die.
No.
Her parents had her buried in Resurrection Cemetery wearing a white dancing dress and matching shoes. The driver of the car that hit her was never found. Now, I will say, that legend, this here's the legend of Resurrection Mary, that was from Wikipedia. But later, when I get into, like, who they think she may have actually been, like, tying her to a real person, that's not the story. So I'm like, how is that the legend?
How did we associate this with this?
But just...
Here we are, guys.
Here we go.
Here's the story.
There's no year and no last name to go along with that legend, so it's hard to research, and we don't truly know who she is or was in life. So, let me tell you one more thing about the Willowbrook Ballroom that Tom told me. It was an infamous pause. I said penitentiary wrong, and I have gotten completely shamed for it.
When?
My mother texted me right away. Several of you have messaged me, which is fine. It's totally fine. But in the Sue Logue episode, so I didn't go back and listen.
Penitentiary?
Yes. And I didn't go back and listen. So when everybody's like saying I said it wrong.
I'm trying to think of like ways you could say it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, in my head, when everybody's like, you said it wrong, I was just like, whatever. I say a lot of things wrong. Why is this new?
Yeah.
But then someone commented, I think on YouTube, and they were like, penitentiary has 5 syllables. And I was like, yeah, penitentiary. And that's what made me go, well, what did I say? Because I know how to say it.
Yeah.
And I went back and listened, and I said penitentiary like twice. And I have no idea why. I think it's because I get so dumb when it comes to pronouncing words on this podcast. I swear I know how to say penitentiary.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I don't know how to say. Clearly. You've all heard it. But penitentiary. Why did I say penitentiary? No clue.
Nobody knows.
Clue.
Nobody knows.
Anyway,
guys.
I also know that infamous is not correct. Infamous. So Willowbrook Ballroom was an infamous Al Capone hangout. And there's all these tunnels underneath that like lead to like a speakeasies on the other side of Archer Avenue.
I think my previous life I was a flapper and I hung out at speakeasies.
So a friend of mine,
obsessed.
He's a fantastic independent musician. His name's Nick Flora.
We love
him. In Nashville. We love him so much. He's actually helped us a lot on this podcast whenever I have a sound question, because I swear we're working hard on it, even though we're never discussing it again. Nick is the person I go to because he knows a lot about this stuff because he's a musician.
Hey, Nick.
He's also got podcasts. He's great. You would all love him. Go Nick Flora, NickFlora.
Go follow everything he
on
does.
Everywhere. Yeah. Anyway, you'd also love his music. You can find him on Spotify.
He does like little lives and it's so much fun.
Yeah. But I remember years ago, played a show up in Chicago, and he told me about this really cool hotel he stayed in where there's like a hidden speakeasy. And it's this whole thing where like you have to find this woman in the hotel and say a phrase to her and she will direct you to the speakeasy. Like how beautifully weird is it?
I need to go.
I know. I need to ask him again like what that place was. But I mean, the whole reason he told me about it was how amazing it was,
I love that.
So just the speakeasy thing. I love it. So anyway,
listen to my stomach growling.
I think that one might have got.
That's great. You all are so welcome. I'm starving to death.
There's also
It's fine.
So there's the tunnels that lead to the speakeasy, but there's also other like escape tunnels that lead to like the forest surrounding area.
Right, if the cops were to come bust them.
Isn't that amazing?
I love that so much.
The Willowbrook Ballroom actually was gutted by a fire like in 2016. So, and I think what I read about it is that like it's going to be replaced by condos and parking lots.
No.
Stupidness.
Dang it.
But will there be cool tunnels under those?
Oh my gosh, I hope so.
I hope so too. Anyway. Okay, so let's talk about the sightings. First, I do want to say I read a couple different versions of that first encounter. I went with the hitchhiker version because I saw that most often, but there's also a version that says the guys had met Mary at the ballroom and she danced with them, and then either they offered or she asked them to give her a ride home.
Oh, okay.
And then on the drive, she asked to be let out near the cemetery, and she disappeared from the car, which is why I told you that she would just... There were different instances in all these sightings where sometimes, and I'll tell you about it, but she just disappears and in different ways.
Just like, peace out.
Yeah. So after that initial encounter, in 1939, a man named Jerry Pallas said he met a woman at the Liberty Grove and Hall at 47th and Mozart. This is not the O. Henry Ballroom. And they danced, and he even kissed her. She asked him to give her a ride home, directed him down Archer Avenue, then got out of the car and disappeared in front of the cemetery. He believes this was Resurrection Mary.
He physically felt the kiss.
Mm-hmm.
He physically felt her up against him dancing.
Several people say they danced with her. That's what I mean. Like, she doesn't appear as a ghost. They don't realize it until she disappears that there's something wrong.
Oh.
So, in 1973, Resurrection Mary was spotted at Harlow's nightclub. Later that year, a cab driver came into Chet's Melody Lounge, which is a bar across the street from Resurrection Cemetery.
All these places sound so cool.
Oh my God, I know. I have never been to Chicago.
No,
I haven't either.
Mm-mm.
My friend Amy went. She and her family went, I don't know, last year or the year before. And
to see Hamilton?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And loved it. And I'm like, why haven't I? Because I didn't realize, I guess, how close it was. We could drive there. We need to do that. We need to put it on the list.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, this cab driver comes into Chet's, and he's like trying to track down a young woman who had accepted a ride from him and then left without paying her fare.
Oh.
She was also spotted in 1976, 1978, 1980, and 1989. And all of those sightings are cases where she was either hit or almost hit by a car.
Oh, gosh.
But then when people, like the driver, would get out of the car to like go check on her, she would disappear.
Oh.
On January 31st, 1979, a cab driver said that he had picked up a young blonde woman on Archer Avenue. And here's his words, okay? A couple miles up Archer there, she jumped with a start like a horse and said, "Here, here." I hit the brakes. I looked around and didn't see no kind of house. "Where?" I said. And then she sticks out her arm and points across the road to my left and says, "There." And that's when it happened. I looked to my left, like this, at this little shack. And when I turned, she was gone. Vanished. And the car door never opened. May the good Lord strike me dead. It never opened.
He's like, guys, I'm telling the truth.
Yeah, I believe him. I believe him. He was standing there in front of me being like, "Listen, Lord strike me dead. That car door never opened."
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay. All right.
She didn't.
How much did you have to drink that night? I don't know. Opinion? I'm not accusing you of anything, sir. Okay.
No, sir. You're probably a great
Just make a
driver.
joke. That's what I do. There's also a story from 1976 that says a driver was passing by Resurrection Cemetery and saw a woman standing on the other side of the locked gates, clutching the bars. He called the police because he was like, well, someone, because they like closed and locked the gates at night with like chains wrapping around. So he's like, well, somebody's gotten locked in there and they're stuck. So he calls the police because he doesn't want anyone to be stuck in a cemetery overnight. Ooh. And when the police came to investigate, they found no one. But when they inspected the gates, they saw that two of the bars had been pried apart and there were impressions of two hands on the bars. Like her handprints are burnt into the wrought iron fence. So cemetery officials said that it was actually damaged by a truck and isn't related to Resurrection Mary. But there are people
like handprints.
Well, so the thing is they've replaced two of those bars. And the people are like, the damage that was done by the truck was because it was damaged by the truck when you were replacing the bars that had the handprints on them. And they say the bars with the handprints are in storage now. And the 2 new bars, like if you go there right now, apparently, based on what I read, I haven't personally seen it, but if you go there now, you can tell these 2 bars are a different color than the rest. And when they try to paint them or something, they don't hold paint.
Oh.
So it's like obvious that these are 2 different bars.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I know.
Spooky.
Makes you want to go look.
Yes.
One of the articles I read has an account given by an old guy named Vince.
Oh, Vince.
Okay, this is good. All right. Where he tells the story of his own encounter with Resurrection Mary that happened 50 years earlier.
He held this story in for that long?
No, I think he's told people.
Oh, okay.
It's just that at the time that this
when they were
was like
interviewing
put in
him
an
or
article.
whatever. Yeah.
He'd gotten all dolled up and gone out that night
I love it so much.
to the O. Henry Ballroom.
Uh-huh.
And he wanted to hear some of his favorite bands play. This is all during the big band era.
Oh, so
While he
good.
was there, he saw a pretty blonde woman in a white dress, and he asked her to dance. She said yes, and they danced for the next several songs. But they were all like fast songs, like they're doing the jitterbug and stuff like that.
I love it.
I know. So they didn't get to talk much because it's the kind of music and the kind of dancing where you're not close to each other.
Yeah.
But then the music slowed down, and they got to talk. And that's when she told him her name was Mary. She told him where she lived.
Oh.
He took particular note of where she lived because it wasn't far from where he lived with his parents.
Oh.
He said he'd noticed when they were so close that her hands were really cold, and he said something like, "Cold hands, warm heart."
Oh.
And they danced together for the rest of the night. And then he was like, he offered to take her home because it was so close to where he lived, and she accepted. But then they only went a few miles when she insisted that he stop the car right in front of the locked gates of the Resurrection Cemetery. Then she opened the door, got out, and said, "I have to go and you can't follow me." So he watches her walk over, lay her hand on the iron chain around the gates, and vanish.
Oh my gosh.
Can you
She's
imagine?
like Cinderella and the Pumpkin.
Oh my God. Like, he's just spent this whole evening with this woman.
That he
was all excited about. They danced the whole night together. She lives near it. It's all like, you can feel it, right?
Yes.
Like he's excited. And then, oh crap, she's a ghost.
You
What
can't
do you
follow
do?
me. I would sit outside the gate every day and wait for her.
Well, so he said he just spent the rest of the night driving up and down Archer Avenue looking for her.
Oh.
And then when the sun came up and they opened the cemetery gates, he drove through there looking for her too.
Oh.
They never found her.
Oh.
So then he was like, okay, I know where she lives. She gave me her address.
Right.
I'm going to go to her house.
Oh.
I keep hiccuping. Okay, so he goes to the house. He goes up the steps to the front door, knocks on the door. A woman answers. And he's like, "Is Mary here?" And I feel like this is every ghost story you've ever heard.
Right.
She's like, "Mary died a few years ago."
Yes.
We haven't had a Mary here in
What do you mean, Mary?
years.
We haven't seen Mary since we laid her in the ground.
So she said Mary died in a car accident 4 years ago. This is the story she told him. She went out dancing with some boys she worked with at Brach's. B-R-A-C-H.
Okay.
Brach's? Sure. Mm-hmm. But they never made it to the dance hall. One of the boys crashed the car, and Mary was thrown through the windshield and died before she got to the hospital.
Oh.
He said that while she was talking, he looked past her, saw a framed photo on the piano behind her, and it was a picture of the woman he
It was
danced with.
her.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, so I love this story. Like, it's such a perfect little
Yes.
satisfying ghost story.
Yes.
Except I feel kind of sorry for him.
Right.
But to your point, he could just start hanging around till she shows up again.
I know.
Then there could be a great movie about this love affair with a ghost.
Yes.
And then she never ages and he does, and then he has to decide if he's going to give up his life for her.
But then if he
And then live
dies,
in the
he's going to be
cemetery.
with her for forever.
Yep. See? Perfect. Let's write it.
TM.
Here's the thing that bothers me though. Here's where I have to be like, let me ruin this for you.
Oh no.
How could it be that he had such a specific encounter that includes interacting with her mother, knowing what house she lived in, where she worked, and then we still don't know exactly who Resurrection Mary was? Like, how do we
true.
know all of that? And they still can't say who she was? Her
There's
mother,
no, like, birth record or anything.
right. Her mother also told him if you want to visit Mary's grave, she's buried in Resurrection Cemetery.
No.
He did say that he never went back to the O. Henry Ballroom or to Resurrection Cemetery ever again.
I would have.
I would have too.
Yeah.
And he said he never even went to a dance hall again because the whole thing just freaked him out so much. Also, he never learned her last name, which seems weird. Like, why would she tell him all this other information but not her last name?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's not like he's going to go Google her.
But he also sounds like a really cute little old man. I don't want to accuse him of lying. I'm just saying I have a question. You know?
It's questionable.
That same article makes a point about how there's kind of a gap in the sighting. Like, there's a whole bunch in the big band era. And then when that dies down, there's not a lot of sightings. And it may just be that dance halls weren't as busy.
Yeah.
But
she's like, well, this isn't lively. I don't want to go dance tonight.
Yeah. They pick back up again in the 70s. The sightings do. And this article has an explanation for that. It was said that Mary had been buried in a term grave. Have you ever heard of this before?
No.
I have not either. But I looked it up, and apparently it's a real thing. That it's not done anymore. But it's a rented plot that only holds remains for a quarter century.
Huh?
When her term expired, all her family had passed away, so there was no one left there to renew it.
Oh.
Right. So, when a term grave expired, they just removed the headstone, and they would bury a person, on top of the grave that was already there.
Oh.
Yep. Apparently, it was a more affordable option to rent your plot than buy one. Okay. So, Mary's term expired, and her coffin was moved to an unmarked grave in a remote corner of the cemetery.
Oh.
After that, people started reporting seeing her again.
Oh.
But again, that all has to just be speculation, because if we know that Mary's grave was a term grave that was moved, blah, 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 then that would imply that we know exactly
where
she was.
Yeah.
And we don't. So, it's all part of the lore. I need to stop applying logic and just enjoy the ghost story.
Yes.
I do really enjoy the ghost story.
Yes, it's good.
And with so many sightings, it's it feels like there has to be something to it. I just don't think it needs the embellishments.
Right.
That's what makes the stuff unbelievable. Just let the story live and breathe on its own, you know? And also, you know how I get annoyed when people make up stuff to just attach themselves to a story?
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm not saying, that's what
That's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Mary has appeared as a hitchhiker. Mary has appeared as a hitchhiker asking drivers for rides along Archer Avenue. She's also surprised some drivers by just opening the car door and climbing in.
She said, I gotta go, guys.
Yeah, and then disappearing at the cemetery gates. Some drivers have even watched her run right through the locked gate and into the darkness.
Oh my gosh.
Others have seen her walking along the side of the road and then vanish. And then there are accounts where she's hit by a car. People will see her bleeding and everything on the road, but when anyone tries to go help her, she disappears.
Oh my gosh.
Like I said, we don't have a confirmed identity for Resurrection Mary. People have researched all the burials in Resurrection Cemetery to try and identify her. And there are two pretty good possibilities. One is Mary Bregovy or Bregovy. It's definitely one of those.
I like them.
She's buried in site number 9819, and she died in 1934 in a car accident, allegedly on her way home from the O. Henry Ballroom. But remember how earlier I was like, this doesn't match up with the legend?
Yeah.
Her death is from a car accident in downtown Chicago, not on Archer Avenue, and it's not identified as a hit and run. But I don't really know how important that is. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where the legend came from.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to try to match her to the legend or change the legend.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So, because of where the car accident happened in downtown Chicago, it seems unlikely that they would have been on their way home from the O. Henry Ballroom.
Oh, okay.
And lastly, Mary Bregovy, something. She wasn't blonde. She had dark hair. And the undertaker who prepared her body for burial said she was buried in an orchid-colored dress, not white. However, the story of the car accident that she was in matches up with the story that Vince told.
Oh.
She worked in a factory, had gone out with some friends from work, and was thrown through the windshield when the car crashed and died on the way to the hospital. It's just did Vince tell that story because he'd heard it attached to Resurrection Mary?
Or had he heard it somehow in like a news article or something
Right.
at some point, and it just like that stuck in his memory?
I mean, I don't even mean that he's consciously making things
Right.
up. It's just it happened 50 years ago.
Yeah.
He's absorbed information along
Right.
the way.
He's associating it with something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know how his story's changed over time and what information has he learned that's sort of been incorporated into
Right.
his account.
Yeah.
The other possibility is a girl named Anna Maria Norcus.
I like it.
She died in 1927, also in a car accident on her way home from the O. Henry Ballroom. Most of the research done into this woman was done by a man named Frank something that starts with an A. It's a heck of a name.
Guys, it's a good one. It's a good name.
Andrasich. Andrasich, something. He lived in the area. He knew a lot of people who had their own experiences with Resurrection Mary, especially people that he went to church with. So he was particularly inclined to believe those people.
Oh.
He didn't start seriously researching it until his brother sent him an article about the ghost in 1994. But once he decided to investigate it, he was like all in. He went through first and secondhand accounts of people he knew and their friends, as well as newspaper articles and burial records and photographs. Several of the people he spoke with had really specific ideas about who they thought Mary was. And so he investigated all of those. And that's how he wound up settling on Anna Norcus.
Oh.
The thing is, she's younger than you would expect. She was 12 at the time that she died.
Oh.
She went by Mary, her middle name. So her name was Anna Norcus. They had a whole reason, something to do with religion, about why she started going by Mary. But it didn't seem like a detail that I needed to include.
Right.
She was blonde and she loved to dance. And she convinced her dad to take her to a dance hall for her 13th birthday. So on July 20th, 1927, the two of them went to the O. Henry Ballroom. On the way back home, around 1:30 in the morning, they went past the cemetery, turned onto 71st Street, north on Harlem to 67th Street, and there, the car dropped into a 25-foot deep railroad cut.
Oh my gosh.
The Chicago Streets Department had failed to post warning signs at the site of the cut, and Anna was killed instantly.
Ooh.
It also said there was actually another guy who died that night the same way. That same night in the same place. His car ran over the thing. Anna was scheduled for a burial in a family lot in St. Casimir Cemetery, which is not Resurrection Cemetery.
Right.
But here's where Frank thinks something went wrong that led to this girl being a ghost, right? Okay. When Anna died, there was a man who lived across the street from Resurrection Cemetery, and he was in charge of the grave diggers. Being a gravedigger was really hard manual labor and apparently didn't pay very well. So it was fairly common for gravediggers to go on strike. And apparently there were gravediggers who were this is this cemetery's gravediggers and this is this cemetery's gravediggers. It doesn't seem like they mixed cemeteries, So stick with me. This is trying to it's his theory. Frank's theory is it's possible that in 1927, at the time that she was supposed to be buried in St. Casimir Cemetery, those gravediggers were on strike, which means this guy's who lived across the street from Resurrection Cemetery, he would have had to call his gravediggers and say, hey, because they can't just leave the body not buried.
Right.
So he was like, you need to go, what would happen? This was done when there was a strike. Because Resurrection Cemetery was one of the main cemeteries, it was commonly used where they would go get the body, put it in a box, bring it to Resurrection Cemetery, and temporarily bury it.
Oh.
Then when the strike ended, they would take the body and go bury it where it was supposed to have been buried.
Oh.
That way they bury it, because it has to be. But it does also end up they need to send it where it was supposed to originally go, to the plot that's been paid for, and perhaps in another family graveyard, So, the thing is, if a strike went on for a long time,
they forgot about it.
Well, the body would be pretty decomposed. And so his theory is when it was time, so that happened, it was time to move her back to the other cemetery, and then they took the wrong body because it was too hard to identify, which means she was mistakenly buried in the wrong place, which is why her spirit has never been able to rest in peace. That's his theory. It's a lot because we don't even know if a strike was happening, but he's just it was common for strikes to happen. And so if there was a strike, then it could have led to all these things, but you have to assume that there was a strike. And I mean, yeah, it does seem like that would be enough for her body to be.
Right.
It could explain why she leaves the cemetery. Maybe she's going to search for something or whatever. I just think Anna's whole story is incredibly sad, whether she is Resurrection Mary or not. Just the idea this little girl loved dancing and just wanted to go dancing.
Well, and if that's what she's doing, she just loves dancing so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So the hitchhiker ghost story isn't unique to Resurrection Mary. We've all heard different versions of this hitchhiker who disappears and then you find out that she's dead. But it all had to start somewhere, right? Like maybe she's the one that started the hitchhiker stories. Also, because there are so many firsthand accounts, it's hard to just completely dismiss the whole thing.
Right.
Remember that bar I mentioned, Chet's Lounge?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Toni said that her dad went there a lot when he was younger, and he never had an encounter with Mary, but that a lot of the people there would tell him about their own sightings. And here's probably my favorite part of this whole thing. And Tom said that he has seen this too. At Chet's Lounge, they leave a Bloody Mary drink on the bar for her, and no one's allowed to touch it.
Oh.
Yeah, like they remake it so it stays fresh. Yeah.
That's adorable.
It just stays out there for her on the bar all the time. That alone makes me want to go.
Yeah, I love that so much.
Yep. And that's it. That's the story of Resurrection Mary.
How cool is that?
I know. I mean, I feel like it's a really believable ghost story.
Yeah.
I think that just because it's a hitchhiker story and we've all heard those doesn't mean it's, like I said, they had to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe she was the original.
Yeah.
You hear that car?
We're in Nicholasville.
Okay, so that's it. Thanks, Toni and
a
Tom,
good
for
one.
telling me that story. Yeah, I really love it.
I love
I
that
love
so
a good
much.
ghost story. I feel like it's been a while since I've heard one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's it. If you would like to send us stories, you don't have to be one of my buddies who just tells me things. You can also email us at witchesmagicmurdermystery@gmail.com.
Yep, or hit us up on Instagram. You can DM us or click on any of those links that are attached to the link tree in our bio.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much.
We love you.
So much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
So much.